Hello class, we are going to start watercolor techniques, and for your technique pages you need to get your station set up, and I have your sketchbook, a pen or a pencil, a couple paper towels or Kleenex or a rag is fine, 2 containers of water, one for dirty water, one for clean water, so make sure to have those right next to you, your paintbrush, and if you have some sort of tape, that'd be good to have for our resist, table salt, and I think that's it. And the first thing that you want to start with is make sure, my paint palette's going to look a little different than yours. These are my personal watercolor sets. And they're all kind of dry at this point. It's fine if your colors dry out. And you can see where I do the mixing, it's pretty dirty. So the first thing that I want you to do, if you haven't done this yet, you can either run the area of your paint palette under water to clean it, or you can just take some paper towel or your rag and clean off the area where you're going to be mixing. So when you open up your paint palette, the other side where the paint isn't, that's where you do all your mixing. It's like your little paint palette. And obviously you can mix and blend colors on your paper too, but for right now, I'm gonna just get it nice and clean. Everywhere where I think I might paint. And mine is kind of sectioned off. You can see all the browns and the yellow ochre. I use that part. All my cool colors are in here. My warm colors are over here. So get that nice and clean, get your station set up. And then the next thing, let me put that up here. I'm gonna turn my paper horizontal. So that's just the way I like to work. And I'm going to use some sort of straight edge. If you don't have a ruler, it's not a big deal. Just find a straight edge. I'm gonna just use my pastel box here. And I'd like you to make 2-inch squares, 2-inch boxes, kind of across your page. And 2 inches is maybe like about the length of your finger-ish. So you don't need to measure this, but I bet you could fit. I bet you could fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on your small sketchbook page. So try to fit 3 across. It's okay if they're a little off. So we're just going to be doing technique practice today. Sorry if you can hear Alira. She wants to draw. She's eating a snack right now. Oops, my ink is getting everywhere. That's okay. So to make your boxes, just kind of rough. So we're going to start with 6 here. Oh yeah, you can see that fine. Okay, you can draw just a second. And I'm going to go ahead and label some right now. I'm going to say this is going to be a wet wash, salt. This is going to be a tape, resist.
No, Mama, don't do that.
This is going to be
Don't do that.
lifting out.
Don't do that.
overlaying color.
Don't do that, Mama. Don't do that.
And
Don't do that, Mama.
textures. So let's start there. So get that all labeled. And then we'll start in a minute. Okay, we're going to start now, and I'm going to be talking about a couple techniques with your brushes as well. So hopefully you have those drawn in or written into your boxes. And I might be moving a little bit fast, but you can always pause my video and fill up your whole space and practice if you need to. So for the tape resist, I'm going to take some tape, and you can just put down a fun little design with your blue tape, whatever you want to do. I like to put pieces down, maybe in a design or a pattern, or whatever you want it to do. And this is going to keep white areas, because in watercolor you typically don't have white. Some of your sets may have white, but you usually don't use white. So you want to leave your paper white. Like if you were to be making or painting clouds, you want to leave your paper white and not put any color in that area. So let's start with the wet wash. I'm going to start by using my clean water. And with watercolor brushes, you never want to make your brush go down like this at the end or at the bottom of your water bucket. It'll ruin the brush. Usually watercolor brushes are nice and soft, unlike acrylic brushes are a little bit harder and more firm. So these, I like to do a little figure 8 and kind of swish the water around to get it wet, and then you can just touch the side of your jar or your container just to get the excess water, or you can always use your paper towel sitting next to you to get excess water off. But right now, just go ahead and put some water down. I know you're not going to be able to see it, but put some water down on your wet wash area. And my pen that I have on my paper is not waterproof. You can see it's starting to leak. That's okay. We'll just use blue paint. And then I'm going to start to touch my blue pigment, you can use whatever color you want, into my wash. And a wash just means that you're using water with it. And I know probably some of you learned this on another video or maybe in a class. And then I'm going to take a second color, do a 2-color wash into it, like this. Maybe put some more pigment in. Just move, and I'm mixing my 2-color wash there, and I'm going to add a little bit more water, and there's a nice wash. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. In my salt square, I'm going to go ahead, put some water down. I'm going to put more pigment in this one. See how I'm just touching down the pigment, the color, into my little wash puddle. If you want to mix colors, you could use your little mixing palette here. Maybe I'll pick up some magenta and make a purple. Pick up some red and then mix some color into that. So I'm going to be painting. So you can tell I'm doing a lot of touching down, and then I'm painting in one direction. And let that color and the water just kind of sit on top of the paper like that. I'm going to rinse my paintbrush out in my dirty water just by doing a little figure 8 like that. I'm not smashing my brush at the bottom, and then I'm tapping it out like this. I'm going to just lay it just right across my water, the top here. I don't know if you can see that. Now I'm going to put salt on this. While it's still wet, I'm going to salt that little puddle of water, and then I'm going to leave it to dry for a while, or probably until tomorrow. All right, I'm going to keep moving. For the tape resist, since I'm going to leave white where the tape is, I'm going I'm going to use more pigment this time. So I'm going to use some clean water. I'm going to use a different color here, going into my other area of my paint palette. I'm going to pick up some orange. And I'm going to use a lot of pigment on this one. I'm going to just paint over my tape. And this will be fun once I pull it up too. I'm adding a little bit of red into it as well. Try to fill up your whole entire square. So back to your wet wash. It's still wet, and now I'm going to wash my paintbrush. And a wash is just with a lot of water, using a lot of water and starting with water usually. And so we're going to do another wash right here where it says lifting out. So I'm going to add water, clean water, and any color you want. I think I'm going to go back to my oranges. That was kind of fun, my oranges. I'm going to put some pigment into that puddle and get the whole area wet. Now this is kind of fun. I'm going to be creating some texture here by lifting out. Set my paintbrush down. I'm going to lift out with a little bit of a paper towel or tissue or whatever you're using, okay? Even cloth works. And I'm going to lift out. Wow, look at that. That's if you need to do a really quick erase. Like if you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's too much. I have too much of a wash right there, or that pigment too bright. You can lift out and take away. And that's how you can erase. I could even probably go back right here and take away, and that creates kind of a different type of texture. So maybe try it there. It's a little harder for you to see on my paper, but you can see it created some texture right there. So try that, lifting out. You can also, if I'm thinking maybe right here, I wanted to take away and fix an area, I can also go back and re-wet an area after I have some pigment on my paper. Go back and re-wet it. And then take away some of that wash. So that's another way to fix a mistake if you have an area that you need to take away. Okay, overlay and color. Same thing, this is really good practice with your washes. I'm gonna lay down a really light wash. Of color. And we're gonna come back to this one. Overlaying color. So I'm gonna put this nice kind of orange down. Maybe make it as even as you can. This is good practice. So make this whole square an even amount of watercolor. See how I've got some area that might be a little too dark, like where my paintbrush keeps picking up? So just go in and fix it. And if this happens, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have way too much pigment, go back in, kind of wash your brush out a little bit, tap out the extra water, or use your paper towel, and go back in with clean water. And then you can move the pigment around if you need to. And if you have way too much paint, you may need to just start in a new square, because you don't want it to look like acrylic paint. You want it to just look like a watercolor wash. Okay, so leave it like that. It's a very just standard square. It's all one value of that one color. It takes control too, brush control, to get that. And then there's my lifting out. I lifted out right there if I wanted to take away my salt, and then my tape resist. Okay. Now this one is textures. Find something laying around. I actually had some bubble wrap, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to use that for a texture. You could use a piece of cloth if you haven't done that yet. Cardboard would be really fun. Maybe a different type of brush. Like if you have another brush laying around, which I do. Let me get it out. For instance, this is an acrylic brush. See how hard the bristles are? They're more rough. This is softer. This is also called a flat brush versus a round brush. I like to use round brushes when I'm doing watercolor, and I like to use flat brushes when I'm painting with acrylic. So this could be a cool texture. I'm going to use bubble wrap, but I'll just try both actually. So this one I'm actually going to use more pigment than what I was doing here with the wash, because I want to see the color on my paper. So I'm going to fill pigment, and just for fun, just to try something different, I'm going to mix a green with a blue and try mixing colors. Ooh, nice. Just so you can work on brush control too, of mixing the two colors. Remember, if you mix across the color wheel, you're gonna get a muddy color. So now that I've got quite a lot of pigment on there versus just a wash, you can see here. See? You can see the water too. I'm going to take my texture bubble wrap and then push it into it. Ooh, cool. And I'm creating interesting texture, almost like you're stamping. So I'm going to leave that like that. Be one more. Okay. And then maybe I'll use this. That didn't really work how I wanted to, but that's okay. All right. Then I added a few more, so if you need to pause the video, you can, and add a couple more. And what I added was liner, dry brush, and gradient. So go ahead and get those drawn in. If you need to pause my video, you can. And then keep an area down there where it says moving your watercolor. And then I'm going to talk about these too. Things to remember. Okay, so I'm going to move to that. Okay, my liner, I'm going to take just as if this were a pen or a pencil. I'm going to take the tip of my paintbrush with some good water, clean water, put it in some pigment, and practice drawing lines. So this is good brush control. I'm going to first just practice by drawing straight lines. Try not to let your watercolor mix or bleed into the other line. It's just control. And then as you start to go, I want you to keep adding paint as you go. As you start to go, drop your paintbrush down so you start getting thicker lines. But try to keep white in between. So you're touching down and then you're pulling up. Ooh, and I overlapped an overlaid color right there. To make my color brighter and more opaque. You could even go back on top of your first few to go darker. So practice that. And then maybe practice, if you've got room, or you could do it on another piece of paper, practice the other direction by pulling towards you. You never want to push away. And then maybe try some diagonal. And yes, I'm going outside my box, but that's okay. This is just practice. It's just practicing drawing with your paintbrush, making lines. That's why I just like to call this one a liner. Okay, so practice that. This is great for outlining objects. You can also do this technique on top of your washes. And speaking of that, I'm going to go back to, you can do this too if these techniques are dry down here. Maybe try, these are dry now, going on top and using your liner technique. I'm just outlining kind of a cool shape that I just saw in my wash. And just practice using your liner technique on top of another color. And this goes right into overlaying color, this one right here. So this is dry for me, and I'm going to take a different color, maybe one that goes well with my orange. So I'm going to just keep going with my red, and I'm going to overlay my color. So this is why it's important to let watercolor dry in between layers too. And if you're wanting to have a really nice seamless color change, then you need to go back and add just a little bit of water to reactivate the other color underneath. That's what's nice about watercolor. You can keep reactivating it under the different layers just by adding some water. But you have to be careful. If you start using too many colors, you're going to just make mud, and then it won't look very good, and your whole painting will just look very muddy. So stick with the same color palette. Try not to move around too much of your pigment. And if you don't use the proper paper, you're going to start getting torn, pilled paper, like getting little balls of paper when it gets too wet. But these sketchbooks that we bought for you, it's mixed media paper, so it can take water media really well. So anyway, there's my overlaying color. You can kind of see it's a really nice effect. And I could put blue on top of orange too. You know, when you mix blue and orange together, you get brown. But when something's dry, let's just try it real quick. You can go on top, and it actually has a cool effect too. So I'm going to use a lot of pigment right here, and I could just overlay color, maybe just by drawing or something like that, which is kind of fun. So just try that. So that's blue on top of my orange. Figure eights when I rinse my paintbrush. I'm just doing this. I'm not touching the paintbrush in the bottom. Sorry. On the bottom of my container, and then get the excess off on the side. It's very therapeutic actually when you paint. If your tape resist one is dry, you could peel it up at this point and then see some really cool white effects underneath like that. Now what's fun about this is you could go back and where it's white, paint in some color, use some overlaying color, and then you start to get some really interesting effects of layering. But I'm going to leave some area white right there too, just so you can remember. So maybe after that's dry, later or tomorrow you can take that tape off and then check out. So anyway, you can do overlaying colors on a lot of different type of techniques too, lifting out as well. Okay, now I'm going to go back to this. Dry brush. Dry brush means get your brush pretty dry. So dab it out on paper towel. And then I'm going to go into one of my pigments that's kind of, maybe has a little bit of water on it. And I'm just gonna use, actually that's looking more, too much water. Just gonna use my paintbrush dry. Sometimes if you get it really dry though, and you can get these textures too. So just try it. Try to get as much water off as you can to get that. And then this next one, gradient value. I want you to try maybe 3 different colors going from dark to light. And how do you do that? Using water, adding water. So I'm going to start by going really, really high opaque pigment here. And then as I go out, start to add, might dab out a little bit, start to add water, and then use your water to pull your gradient out without trying to make a line between. See, like right here, I have a little bit of a line. So I just tried one, like that. And try maybe 3. Put 3 on this in this little box. You can also do this elsewhere on another page to practice. I'm going to put more pigment back in. So work with gradient tones going across your page. Okay? And then I might use this one. Use some water. And then pull it out into your water wash. And then one last one. Oh, I got that really nice dark blue. To really get the pigment off my brush on that one because I dipped it a lot in the pigment. But look at that. I can just take water, clear water, start over here, and then start to pull my puddle across. Done. That's pretty fun. And then you can play with the control of how much water and pigment you have. There we go. And then that is a nice segue into moving your watercolor. So you should have a bigger space for this because I want you to play with it and have fun. I'm going to put some water down. And then I'm going to take a color and just watch it. Watch it move and flow. And then play with the amount of water you put in. Put some pigment back in, touch it in, watch it move. So some people like to paint with watercolor like this, where their paper's extremely wet. They're using really big, flimsy, soft brushes, and they're just letting the water do its thing. And then some people like more control, like with the liner. So I'd like you to experiment and just figure out what's fun for you and play with using too much water, using not enough water, making it look like gouache or acrylic, which you can if you get it really, really opaque, high pigment, and just move your color around. You could play with dripping. I might go back to if you don't like an area, you can say, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to lift out and I'm going to start over and I'm going to add more water to that. I can even take more water in and then take that area out. That's kind of fun. So play with that area. And then a couple little tips to remember. Things to remember. How much water you're using and your 2 containers of water. See my dirty water and my clean water. Brush cleaning. Be nice to your brushes. Use the side of your containers to get all the excess water out. Always have a paper towel or a towel next to you. Letting layers dry. So you can remember the overlaying color, letting layers dry and textures dry, and then you can go back on top and paint other colors on top, or actually draw with your paintbrush and outline objects. And then try not to make muddy paintings. So even maybe intentionally, maybe you could try to make mud, just make the whole thing look muddy and see what happens. So experiment today, practice your techniques, and we will move on next class and just have fun.